Every person you will ever meet has been wounded in some way. And that's also true for you and me as well. We all tend to hide our wounds. But the good news is, sometimes that's totally unnecessary. Hey, welcome to Mornings with Bishop Robert. Thanks for joining me. Come on in, have a seat. My goal is to introduce people to the Jesus they never knew, then help them get to know him and his word personally and better. So if our time together today speaks to your heart, let me invite you to like, subscribe, and also share this with a friend. You know, there's an important principle I want to develop from an earlier devotional. It was called Wounded, but Better Now, that I couldn't give the attention it needed just because of the space constraints. I only have so much time each day. So I want to dig in a little deeper today. While discussing a time that I'd been shot, I wrote, I had to totally hide it. Only my wife knew. I covered it up and continued to try and perform so I could meet day-to-day expectations. In other words, in the midst of constant pain, I tried to appear normal. Well, like I said, we're all wounded in many ways. And some of these are the result of normal life events. The passing away of a loved one, the loss of a job, or a natural disaster that destroys our property. We all face these type of events, and they're a shared element of our human condition. As a result, we tend to have a level of compassion for them. We make space for the recovery process. You know, my dad passed away with very little warning. We only had about 48 hours from the cardiac incident that brought him into the hospital until he went home to be with Jesus and his beloved wife, Anne. When that happened, every business meeting I had planned for the coming week was canceled. My colleagues at work stepped in and graciously handled everything on my behalf. When I did return to work, there was a period of time where my focus and my capacity were, well, really diminished by my grief. And everyone with whom I dealt understood and was really most gracious. But they did, of course, expect me to recover. They fully anticipated a rapid return to normal focus and operational skill. But there are deep and painful wounds that slash our lives without warning. Their pain's overwhelming, debilitating, even paralyzing. And yet, because of the way the trauma has been inflicted on us, we feel as though we've got to hide it. We may feel guilty or ashamed. I have spoken with victims of rape and other sexual abuse that were unwilling to report the incidents to the police. I've ministered to people who aborted their children. These victims were unable to share their pain, even with close family members. And yeah, I chose that word victim deliberately in relation to those who've had an abortion. Because though they were participants in the event, it never changes the fact that abortion has two victims. Many of us, we feel as though we've got to hide our wounds from those around us. You know, cover them up. Try to perform so we can meet day-to-day expectations. So in the midst of constant pain, we try to appear normal, whatever that is. Today's verse from the prophet Isaiah brings more insight. It says, he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be made whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. Isaiah, writing some 800 years or so before Christ, sees with incredible accuracy the elements of Messiah's crucifixion. He was pierced for our rebellion. Oftentimes it's our own deliberate sin, our rebellion, that either brings or increases the pain and the shame of our wounds. That's one of the reasons we try to hide them. We don't want others to know how deeply we're flawed, how sinful we really are on the inside. But the truth is that though we may not sin in exactly the same way, we all sin. Christ was pierced for our rebellion. Our sin pierces his heart just as much as that Roman spear did. And now, as then, blood and water pour forth. Because without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sin. That's a lesson we learn from the Old Covenant, then see fulfilled in the New Covenant. You know that John saw both blood and water is visual confirmation that Jesus had physically died. His heart was no longer pumping the blood, the solids. They had separated from the plasma. We don't need to hide our sin and shame. He was pierced for our rebellion and understands it fully. The blood and the water that flowed from his side can wash us white as snow. He was crushed for our sins. The weight of our sin, that painful impact of what we've done, it can seem to be more than we can bear. But Jesus allowed himself to be crushed by the heavy weight of the cross as he fell time after time on Jerusalem's streets. His grace, it can free us from the crushing burden of pain. He was beaten so we could be made whole. We have a very difficult time forgiving ourselves, you know. We know the way sin controls us. We see what others do not. There's an idiom in English that says, don't beat yourself up over it. It means go easy on yourself. However, in the case of our sin, we deserve to be beaten up over it. But Jesus lovingly accepts the beating we deserve. He takes our punishment on himself. The Bible tells us that he who knew no sin actually took our sin upon himself so he could give us the pronouncement of total righteousness. He was whipped so we could be healed. The price for sin, every sin, was fully paid. All that's necessary is to accept the gift that's been lovingly purchased and generously offered. No need for shame or regret. He knows our failures and our sins in intimate detail, and yet he loves us in spite of our sin. No need to hide our wounds. Well, before you go, could I ask you to help me introduce people to the Jesus they never knew and help them get to know him and his word personally and better? One way you could do it is by clicking like on this video, because it really does help more people see it. Then click follow or subscribe and click that notification bell so when I post a new video, you'll know. Hey, one more thing. I'd like to put you on my mailing list so no one can deplatform us. When you do, I'll send you a free copy of this book, Count to One. I'll pop it right in your inbox. One more thing. Would you please share this video with a friend? Because as you do, that makes you part of the team, touching people's hearts all over the world with the love of Jesus. I really appreciate you helping. Thank you.